Chapter 1 Dr. Cheng. Any patient suffering from mental trauma is someone worth listening to. The primary goal of psychiatric care is not to provide patients with an unachievable state of happiness, but rather to help them build up their own patience and resolve to confront their own struggles. Professor, does that mean that you believe that mental illnesses can't be treated? No, quite the opposite in fact. Mental illnesses can be treated, as long as we provide these patients with sufficient patience and resolve. Then, Professor, what if your patient ends up falling in love with you because of that? Chengxi raised her head and smiled at the student who had asked the question, a young, pretty girl who immediately hid behind her neighbor upon noticing Chengxi's gaze. Chengxi was a psychiatrist and, at the same time, a lecturer at a medical university. Because of her age, wit, and looks, she was very popular among all the students, and her lectures every Thursday were almost always filled to maximum capacity. Of course, this meant that she also received all sorts of strange questions at the end of every lecture. This wasn't the first time she had been asked such a question, and so she was able to answer it handily. Smiling, she said, "I think I'd be very happy, because that would mean that the patient's mind is under a wonderful misconception." Someone else followed up and asked, "Professor, do you think that love is a misconception?" Rather than that, I'd call it more of a temporary illusion. Have you had such an illusion, Professor? No, because I'm already old. Boo! The whole crowd of students playfully booed her comment. Pretending to be old is shameful. A bold student even jokingly asked, "Professor, I don't mind that you're old, so can I date you?" Chengxi smiled as she nimbly shot back, "A date in the lab as my test subject?" The student who had just asked her about dating quickly recanted with a serious expression on his face. Love between students and faculty isn't permitted. Professor, I'll do my best to work on my self-restraint. Everyone laughed, including Chengxi. How regretful. The classroom once again filled with laughter. The bell rang not too long later, signaling that it was time for the students to file out of class. While saying goodbye to her students, Chengxi packed up her books and teaching materials. But just as she was about to leave, she noticed a male student that was resting his head on his desk, sound asleep. She walked over to him and quickly prodded him awake. The male student rubbed the sleep from his eyes and looked at her. "Do you want some candy?" asked Chengxi as she extended her hand, a colorfully wrapped sweet resting on her palm. "I'm sorry that my class made you feel so bored." The student looked at her in a daze, as if she were a monster. Chengxi smiled, left the sweet on his desk, and stepped out of the classroom. While walking, she received a call. "Chengxi, where are you?" The phone call was from Chengxi's own professor, Madame Cai Yi. She was both Chengxi's doctoral advisor and a national authority on psychiatry. After retiring, she felt restless about doing nothing, and subsequently opened up her own office and lab. "I just finished teaching. Could come to my office." Chengxi left her things in her office and immediately headed over. Madame Cai's office was right next to her home, and its surroundings were the definition of natural beauty. By her office was a lake, and by the lakeside was a flock of pigeons. The surroundings were filled with vibrant shrubs and blossoms, and, even more unusually, the water itself was clear and limpid. It was truly a relaxing place to be. The only problem was that it was a bit far from the school, and the evening rush hour only exacerbated the long drive. By the time Chengxi arrived, it was already late enough that the early winter's dusk was only being held at bay by the surrounding lights. She pushed the door open and entered, bringing wisps of the winter cold in with her. Madame Cai's hair was streaked with grey, and her gold-rimmed glasses gave her a classic scholarly air. She was sitting on the sofa in front of her desk, talking with the young man sitting beside her. Upon hearing Chengxi enter, both people looked over at Chengxi. Madame Cai smiled at her. "You're here already? It's cold outside, isn't it?" Chengxi cheerily replied, "It's fine, just a little windy." The two made small talk as Madame Cai motioned for Chengxi to sit by her side. She pointed at the young man and introduced the two, saying, "This is the CEO of Donglai, Lu Chenju, or Director Lu." And to Lu Chenju, she said, "This is the young, pretty, and creative Dr. Cheng that I've been telling you so much about. Chengxi knew of Donglai, a large drug manufacturer. Many of Madame Cai's projects were supported by the company. She just hadn't expected their CEO to be so young. He was a relatively handsome man, and probably not even 30 yet. However, Chengxi's first impression of Lu Chenju was not only that he was young and handsome, but also cold and aloof. When their gazes met, it was as if she were but a speck of dust in his eyes. Chapter 2. Mr. Lu. Having seen all sorts of patients, Chengxi was very tolerant towards people with slightly unusual behavior, and didn't mind his demeanor that much. Since her teacher had introduced her, she smiled and greeted, "Nice to meet you." But Lu Chenju kept staring at her, his forehead slowly creasing. "You only have one dimple?" Chengxi, slightly baffled, automatically replied, "Yes." "How ugly." This unexpected evaluation left Chengxi speechless. Cai also looked on blankly for a moment before laughing heartily. "Your students would probably cry if they ever heard that someone evaluated a professor renowned for her beauty as ugly, ha ha." She laughed so happily that Chengxi felt a bit exasperated, and she said to Lu Chenju, "I'm sorry for disgusting you with my ugliness. Do you want me to cover up that side of my face?" This sparked another bout of laughter from Cai, but it was as if Lu Chenju couldn't sense the humor in her tone. He expressionlessly looked down at his watch. "Let's go." Cai wiped the tears of laughter off of her face. "Your grandparents aren't here yet." "They're late." "Do we need to wait for them?" Lu Chenju responded indifferently, his voice detached. Chengxi had some more time to look at him now. Lu Chenju was indeed expressionless, his handsome face as apathetic as still water. She raised her eyebrows slightly upon seeing that Cai was blinking rapidly at her. "Let's go." "HM?" "To get food with us." "Oh." Chengxi helped her teacher up, and then followed along somewhat confusedly. Lu Chenju's grandparents never showed up, so it was only the three of them at the dining table. Lu Chenju was reticent, and it was mainly Chengxi and Cai doing the talking during the meal. But just as the waiter served the last fruit platter, he did say something. "Remove it." The waiter hesitated, and Chengxi and Cai stopped talking. Lu Chenju pointed at the platter a little impatiently. "What are you thinking, plating the fruit in such an ugly fashion?" The waiter, Cai, and Chengxi all looked at the platter. Quite honestly, the fruit platter was plated beautifully, with care and precision. The platter consisted of half a honeydew carved into the shape of a flower, which was then filled with a variety of vibrant fruits. It was a natural piece of art. But Chengxi quickly noticed that on that platter was a lopsided cherry tomato, the likely reason for Lu Chenju's distaste. As expected, this person has a very serious form of OCD. Cai did not seem to find his behavior unusual, and waved at the waiter with a smile. "Take it away, will you?" And, as if nothing had happened, she turned to Chengxi. "Keep talking about that patient from just now." Chengxi continued explaining, her family invited a spirit medium to purge all the ghosts from their house, claiming that she must have been possessed. During the ritual, the girl was badly scared, and in her panic, accidentally killed her grandmother. When I saw her during my daily rotations, her condition had already reached a very severe state. She firmly believed that someone had cut her head off, and that she was a headless corpse. Lu Chenju looked at Chengxi after she finished talking. It was perhaps the first time he had directly looked at her after having commented on her lone dimple. Chengxi was talking about one of the patients currently in her care, one with a serious case of coated syndrome, colloquially known as the walking corpse syndrome. Cai responded, "This is truly a classic case of coated syndrome. It's a very rare illness in this country. How do you plan on tackling it?" But before Chengxi could respond, Cai's phone rang. Chengxi heard her say a few words into the phone, before saying to the group, "Something urgent came up at the office, I have to go." Chengxi stood up. "Let me walk you outside." As a doctor, there were always sudden, unexpected situations, especially in the psychiatry department when patients' illnesses flared up. Most people wouldn't be able to handle them. Cheng Shi wasn't bothered by Cai's sudden departure, only thinking about how she might be able to help out. But Cai stopped her. "It's fine, my assistant is coming to fetch me, and there are enough people on the scene already. You should stay here and enjoy a nice meal with Director Lu." She then looked over at Lu Chenju. "You'll help me take care of Cheng Shi, won't you?" Chapter 30, It's a Date? Lu Chenju, indifferent as usual, replied, "That's fine." Cai smiled and patted Cheng Shi's hand. Before long, Cai's assistant had arrived, and Cheng Shi was walking Cai to the door. By the time she returned, Lu Chenju had already put down his chopsticks. "Are you full?" Lu Chenju nodded. Cheng Shi retrieved her jacket that was draped on a nearby chair. "Then, let's go as well." She kept thinking about what Cai had mentioned. In general, patients that could alarm even her teacher were quite remarkable, and she very much wanted to observe her teacher in action. However, Lu Chenju didn't move. His distant gaze, as if covered in a thin layer of frost, landed on her face. "It seems that you're really quite unaware," he sneered. "Did you think that your teacher really had an emergency? Or why my grandparents said that they would come, but never showed up? What do you mean?" Their actions were all premeditated. Premeditated? Lu Chenju looked at her and couldn't help but ask, "How on earth did you become a psychiatrist? This is a blind date in disguise. Could you really not tell?" Cheng Shi was at a loss for words. She coughed violently to break the awkwardness. I didn't know." She had thought that the reason behind her teacher introducing Lu Chenju to her was for something important, like helping her raise funds for a grant she was writing. Lu Chenju's face remained expressionless, and Cheng Shi felt a bit embarrassed. "Sorry, I really didn't notice Professor Cai's plan." Cai had been single her entire life, so Cheng Shi had never imagined that she would try to be a matchmaker for her. Lu Chenju snorted lightly. "It's fine." His knuckles rapped on the table as he continued, "You still haven't mentioned how you plan to deal with that patient of yours." It seemed like he had really taken an interest in the subject. Cheng Shi thought for a bit, sat down again, and started outlining her rough plan. Patients suffering from Cotard syndrome generally find social interaction difficult, but can often be savants in their personal areas of interest. I'd like to have her start doing personally interesting activities. That way, she can immerse herself in her fantasies and I can slowly help her accept reality using her fantasies as a medium. I'd have imagined that you would start by restraining her or locking her up. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I don't support severely restricting patients in general. How confident are you of curing her? Doctors can only be fully confident in patients who firmly aim to get better. Lu Chenju remained silent for a while, before finally asking her, "Would you sleep with one of your patients?" Cheng Shi didn't understand. Lu Chenju's tone was as tepid as if he were discussing the weather. "What if you accidentally got into bed with your patients?" Cheng Shi laughed. "That's impossible." "But what if it happened?" Lu Chenju was unexpectedly insistent on this point, and looked at her intently. "Would you continue treating him?" Cheng Shi was unable to follow his logic, and was still confused at how the subject had suddenly changed from a patient suffering from Cotard syndrome to a patient getting into bed with their doctor. But she could see what kind of answer Lu Chenju wanted, so she responded, "No." Lu Chenju laughed lightly. This was the first time Cheng Shi had ever seen him laugh. His lips curved slightly up and his eyes were without any sense of warmth, but his mien had an unexpectedly handsome coolness. After that, Cheng Shi ate dinner patiently. Lu Chenju's behavior seemed similar to that of a robot with a pre-programmed routine. He wouldn't do anything else before finishing a given task. For example, with regards to this blind date that seemed unfathomable to Cheng Shi, Lu Chenju instead seemed determined to check all the boxes. Once the duo left the restaurant, Lu Chenju said, "Next in the schedule is watching a movie, taking a walk, or drinking at a bar. Which do you want to do?" His businesslike tone left Cheng Shi's lips twitching. "Can I skip all of those activities?" "Then let's go drinking." His matter-of-fact tone had already made the decision for her. Snapping his fingers, Lu Chenju signaled an approaching taxi to stop. He pulled the door open, waiting for Cheng Shi to get in. This series of actions was really quite smooth, Cheng Shi noted silently. She hesitated for only a few seconds before getting into the car. Reflecting upon it later, Cheng Shi dismissed her actions as the occupational habit of a doctor. Lu Chenju's actions dripped with oddities, and such oddities boasted a near instinctual attraction for psychiatrists. Chapter 4 My Partner. Despite saying that they were going to a bar to drink, Lu Chenju instead brought Cheng Shi to Phoenix Stage, a famous local nightclub. He was on his phone inviting people all throughout the drive, so by the time they arrived, the private room was already filled to the brim. Upon seeing their arrival, those people all stood up and greeted Lu Chenju. Some called him Director Lu, some as Chief, and some, like Cai Yi, simply as Ju. But without exception, everyone noticed Cheng Shi, who was standing behind Lu Chenju. Someone who seemed to be on very good terms with Lu Chenju even directly asked, "Who's this young lass?" "My partner." The room fell quiet, and Cheng Shi almost tripped over her own feet. She stumbled, only regaining her balance after grabbing Lu Chenju's sleeves. Her fingers even accidentally brushed over his hand, and the warmth of his skin caused her heart to skip a beat. As she lifted her head, she saw that everyone's gaze was focused on her hand, which was still holding onto Lu Chenju's sleeve. Her fingers were fair and delicate, but who knew whether the germophobic Mr. Lu would suddenly become infuriated and cut her hand off. Somewhat discomforted by all the attention, Cheng Shi silently withdrew her hand, patted Lu Chenju's sleeves down, and pretended that nothing had happened. "Mr. Lu's just joking. My name's Cheng Shi, and I'm a doctor." Lu Chenju didn't refute her, merely looking at her once before taking his jacket off. The room was a little warmer. Meanwhile, Cheng Shi tried to convince herself that Lu Chenju's behavior wasn't because he resented her for wrinkling his sleeve. But the truth was that he did, because he immediately threw the jacket at her. "Return it to me after you've washed it." Cheng Shi was left speechless once again. Was this a form of selective germophobia? Where he can have lunch outside, but not bear someone else's touch? Lu Chenju turned and walked away as Cheng Shi was busy diagnosing Lu Chenju in her mind. The man who had just asked her who she was smiled at her. "Hi, doctor, I'm Shu Po, one of Ju's friends." Cheng Shi nodded at him. "Nice to meet you. Sit here." The man called Shu Po led Cheng Shi over to a seat, directly next to Lu Chenju. Cheng Shi made sure to stay as far away from him as possible this time. The atmosphere in the private room quickly grew rowdy again, the young men and women clumping together as they sang karaoke. Next to Cheng Shi, Shu Po asked Lu Chenju, "Ju, what do you want to play tonight?" Lu Chenju lounged on the sofa as he looked at the singing people with a supercilious look on his face. He pointed at Cheng Shi and said, "Whatever, as long as you take care of her." Shu Po smiled. "Are you trying to let your partner see what your world's like?" Lu Chenju reiterated, "Anything's fine." Shu Po, still smiling, turned to look at Cheng Shi. "What do you want to play, doctor?" Cheng Shi actually didn't want to play anything. She didn't enjoy partying, and almost never thought of drinking, going to bars, or singing karaoke. But since she was already here, when Shu Po asked her, she also replied, "Anything's fine." Her answer was really quite careless, and was something she would regret countless times in the future, but she had no choice. That was the unfortunate answer she had given. And so Shu Po called a bunch of people over to play a simple game of guessing dice with her. To Cheng Shi, this wasn't anything challenging, but the key point was that she hadn't played before. This meant that before she could fully grasp the trick behind the game, she had lost, and was subsequently forced to drink some alcohol. The alcohol consisted of a vibrant liquid in a beautiful glass cup, on top of which faint flames were dancing. Before this, Cheng Shi had never drunk any liquor but beer, being both a studious and obedient girl. She didn't know how strong this alcoholic drink was, and she didn't think much of it upon seeing its beautiful appearance, and so she downed it in one gulp. Then, she collapsed. An almost instantaneous collapse, right as she finished the alcohol. The last thing she remembered was the man called Shu Po exclaiming beside her, "Damn, is her tolerance that low?"